I think AI is the future, and having just a baseline grasp of what it is and what it isn't is super important.
People have generally understood that generative AI perhaps isn't the silver bullet that's going to solve all our problems.
It's such a fast-moving domain that not experimenting and staying open-minded when it comes to new tooling would be a mistake. This is why Gen AI is so appealing, because it almost lures you into this false sense of security that you don't need good data, because the model's so comprehensive and it knows so much about random stuff anyway. And I think where we've got to with the advent of ChatGPT is everyone's super excited. I think eyes have been open to the possibilities of this technology and how it's kind of going to enable a big step forward in productivity and just the way that businesses work and people work generally. I find prioritization the hardest because I want to do everything.
Yeah. So it's almost as if it might not be that much of an issue if certain things are being duplicated, as long as everyone's operating against the same ethos, which is we're solving problems. We want to standardize the big stuff, and we're happy with a little bit of variation on the small stuff. This episode of VUX World is brought to you by NLX. NLX is the enterprise conversational AI platform that enables some of the world's most admired brands to build and manage chat, voice, and multimodal applications at scale. So if you are looking for a platform to power all of your conversational automation initiatives, you're looking for something that's enterprise grade, something that gives you the flexibility and control to create the kind of experiences that you know your customers need, then check out NLX. You can find out more at nlx.ai. That's nlx.ai. Thank you, NLX, for sponsoring VUX World. The following is a conversation with Sonia Ingram. Sonia is the Global AI Director at Pandora, the global multinational jewelry retailer. And this conversation is all about how to develop AI maturity. We talk through Sonia's 5-stage process, or 5 pillars for developing AI maturity. It's got things in there like AI literacy, how to develop AI literacy across your organization, from the workers down to the leaders, or up to the leaders, and vice versa. How to put in place governance, how to manage risks, how to build the right kind of technology, the right kind of teams, and how to align all of that to solving a business problem, aligning it to the business purpose. Whether you're just getting started leveraging AI, whether you've got a center of excellence already, whether you're looking to scale, whether you've got a pretty mature operation, there'll be lots of little nuggets in this conversation to help you start and scale your AI initiatives. Without further ado, this is Sonia Ingram, Global AI Director at Pandora, on VUX World. All right, Sonia, welcome to VUX World. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me. It's we've known each other for a little while now, and I've been excited to hear, your recent endeavors and what you're up to and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, super looking forward to this. Thank you for spending the time.
My pleasure. No, it's nice to be invited.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about AI maturity today. We're going to talk about building AI maturity. I think it's a really relevant conversation to have now, because I don't know what you think, but it seems to me as though, the world kind of goes in these sort of phases, like businesses go in these phases as well, where like everything gets outsourced for a while and then everything gets insourced after that, and then it gets outsourced again, then it gets insourced again. It's kind of like in maybe like the 2018s to maybe 2020s and such, like chatbots and voice assistants, and not that there was a lot of machine learning kind of stuff going on, but like in terms of like a lot of stuff was just being given to other organizations, like solve that problem for me, Whereas then ChatGPT comes along, large language models and generative AI come along, and it's like, well, everything's just at the end of an API now, so we can do that ourselves. And it seems to me as though everything's kind of moving more towards businesses wanting to build their own capabilities and establish their own kind of in-house capabilities. Would you kind of concur with that sort of sentiment?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And I think you're absolutely right with the kind of ebb and flow of the hype cycle and what's kind of exciting and new in the world of AI. I'd say it's been a really interesting journey, because I feel like prior to ChatGPT, the focus was much more on, machine learning, big data. Companies were excited about. It was much more that pure, let's solve a business problem. And I think where we've got to with the advent of ChatGPT is everyone's super excited. I think eyes have been open to the possibilities of this technology and how it's kind of going to enable a big step forward in productivity and just the way that businesses work, and I guess that people work generally. I think we're maybe coming just over the rim of Gartner's hype cycle. Yeah. People were super excited. Gen AI was the answer to everything, but actually it's kind of worthless, a bit more of a nice to have unless you're actually solving business problems. And I think now you're absolutely right. There's a drive to embed this technology into businesses. People want to have teams that can run it, that can develop Gen AI tools and use productivity assistants and things like that. But I feel like we need to come back to that original purpose and really where the value is going to be added, which is solving business problems.
Yeah.
So it's a journey.
100%. What's interesting is that I spent the beginning of this year on a little bit of a rampage, kind of like calling out every time I saw something on LinkedIn about this is an AI agent. I'd spent a long time, like loads of research to try and like understand the definition of an agent. And I wrote this big long article, about 4,000 words, like synthesizing all these different definitions from all over the world and that from like the 70s up till now to arrive at like, an actual definition that I can't remember the specific researcher whose definition I kind of like arrived at. But essentially, it was kind of like, if this stuff's been going on for a long time, it's been sort of defined, and now everything else is marketing that's taken over and it's kind of misleading. And so the very beginning of this year, it was a little bit like, calling out all of this, like what I would class as sort of misleading marketing rhetoric. But since then, it seems as though, I think you're right, that I think people have generally understood that generative AI perhaps isn't the silver bullet that's going to solve all our problems. Salesforce recently announced version 2 of their agent force, which is deterministic logic and the ability to capture variables and things like that. So it's kind of like, and then Apple pushed back Siri to the back end of the year because they can't quite figure out how to get it kind of working exactly precisely. So it's like this is not an easy thing to do, and it's not push the button and your whole kind of problems are solved. So it seems as though like collectively the industry is now beginning to settle down a little bit, which is maybe this kind of like agentic AI hype is like, although promising, is not necessarily right now. And maybe there's actual ways that we can, start to apply it to actual problems, even if that's in a very narrow capacity, to actually get some value from it, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also people get super excited about new tech, which is great. But I think there's something about where does an agent fit in versus traditional RPA, for example. Like, is this actually the best approach to solve the problem in question? And as you said just there, bringing it back to the business problem that you're trying to solve is like the key, I think, for technology generally, but particularly in this space, because the costs can really mount up. Like Gen AI, do you really need this massive model that you're calling by API? Actually, you could use just a simple bit of rules-based logic essentially to help guide the conversation that you're interested in. And I think also just awareness of like the environmental considerations of large language models, and things are getting kind of insane on that front, which it's very easy to forget about. And I think with all the various sustainability work that's going on across multiple different businesses, that's something that should be factored in when you are designing these kind of solutions. Yeah.
And I think that's probably all part of building maturity, isn't it? Is having the ability to be able to discern between what the right technology is for the right problem, basically. So tell us about your journey then. So how did tell us a bit about your experience and kind of like how you kind of arrived at Pandora, and we'll maybe get into some of the Pandora stuff and what you do there. But tell us a bit about your journey and what got you interested in AI in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So I probably came through quite an untraditional path. So my background in like molecular biology, I did a PhD in molecular biology doing wet lab research, but I did a couple of modules on computational biology as well. And that was at the time when data science was getting like a lot of momentum. People were very excited about it. I think it was around the time of Forbes's article, like the sexiest job of the decade or something, data scientist, which sounded super appealing. So yeah, I was living in London at the time and started getting involved with various meetups and just the data science community around London, which is awesome. So, and that was where I kind of learned more about what it is to be a data scientist versus like a computational biologist. And that sounded really appealing because after I finished uni, like before my PhD, I had a little exploration, let's say, of medical communications, which
Right.
I liked. I liked the consultancy element of it, but it wasn't like technical enough for me, which is why I went back to uni and did my PhD. And I thought that that was really interesting about data science, that whether you're an external consultant or an internal like employee, you're still a consultant for the rest of the business, trying to help solve business problems and using like data to do that. Plus, I really love statistics, so that was a good driver into data science as well. Yeah, so I ended up doing a boot camp, S2DS, if anyone is familiar with it, and then through that, I worked with a consultancy called BJSS for a couple of years, and then moved into Lloyds Bank, where I was part of the natural language engineering team. And that was like before LLMs were cool. So, we were doing a lot of call center analytics and traditional NLP, which was really exciting. Yeah, and then after that, I decided to take a bit of a leap of faith and go freelancing. Just, I love Lloyd, had an amazing experience there, but I just wanted to explore different sectors, different sizes of companies, and just get a bit of a breadth of experience across the domain. Yeah, and then my wonderful ex-manager from Lloyd had moved across into Pandora, and when she was going on maternity leave, she got in touch with me because we worked together really closely before, and she kindly gave me the opportunity to cover her maternity leave as director of AI at Pandora. So
nice.
yes,
And there we are.
career.
Yeah, nice. So for those tuning in, it's really interesting that, because I don't know whether that's necessarily a non-traditional path. I mean, is there any such thing as a traditional path these days? Like, most of the people I speak to have come from all kinds of background. Some people I was speaking to the other week was like, physicist kind of PhD and stuff like this. And then like, even like on the creative side, playwriters and this, that, and the other. It's like people come from all over the place and arrive in the sort of AI space, which is really
very true. And I think that's more true maybe of our generation. I think
maybe
the new data scientists coming through are much more computer science, machine learning masters, and have come through that more traditional route.
Right. That's
but
interesting.
Yeah, I think when data science was still very new, everyone came from every direction, which I think is great because it's so many different perspectives contributing to the field.
We're the wanderers. But what's interesting is that, like, it's almost like there's a slide that I've used in various presentations that kind of, it shows that it's something like 60% of jobs in America didn't exist in 1940. So it's like 60% of Americans are in jobs that didn't exist in 1940 is the stat. And apparently 85% of all job growth has come from technology enabled jobs. And I kind of was thinking about that because since I kind of come across that, everyone who I meet, I'm like, your job didn't exist 50 years ago. Your job didn't exist 20 years ago. And like an AI director is even new, I would say, within the last 5 years, and it's becoming a more common kind of role within organizations that they've got someone whose sole responsibility at a senior level is to enable the organization to leverage AI effectively. And it's a
Yeah.
really interesting sort of transition. So for those that perhaps don't have senior AI people within their organizations, this is all part of building maturity, as we've been saying. So what does an AI director do? You know, what's the predominant kind of like scope of your role then at Pandora?
Yeah, great question. I think it's so I straplined it as driving the AI transformation across the organization. So it's very broad and I think covers a lot of different things. And I think, yeah, you're right. A lot of organizations probably don't have AI directors or are just starting to consider or introduce that role, especially if they're not kind of traditionally if they're not traditionally data-driven organizations or sectors like finance, I think is actually very far in this space. I think they've been driving AI for a long time. But yeah, so what do I do? I think okay, maybe let's start with the first bit. What's the purpose of the role? I think a lot of organizations want to adopt AI and don't really know where to start. So I'd say the first kind of remit of an AI director would be to advise and educate on what's needed to enable AI. Because I don't know if you've seen that meme that's been going around with a guy, there's a staircase and the bottom step is like data quality, then data accessibility and all this stuff. And Gen AI is right at the top step and the guy's trying to leapfrog everything and go straight there.
There's another one I've seen, which is like, there's like a heaven and hell meme, and like AI kind of is at the top in heaven, and the stairs start going up, and then the stairs get halfway and then crash down, and in hell is bad data.
So true. But I think also this is why Gen AI is so appealing, because it almost like lures you into this false sense of security that you don't need good data because the model's so comprehensive and it knows so much about just random stuff anyway, and it can give you what sounds like a very logical response or answer to a lot of questions with things like zero prompt
like zero shot prompting and stuff.
Zero shot, thank you. Yeah. Whereas with more traditional machine learning, if you're doing like, I don't know, linear regression, you absolutely need data quality before you can do anything, before you can even do a POC. So I think that's a bit of a balance as well on educating the business that actually you still need good data quality, but it's just maybe more unstructured data, whereas traditionally it's structured data, something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the first part then you're saying is to help the organization kind of understand how to leverage AI. What else constitutes or what's next after that, I suppose, or is it a linear thing? Like what else kind of is involved in that sort of role?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and I've been basing this on kind of 5 key pillars that you need to drive or enable AI transformation. So the first one I think is literacy. We've talked about that, educating senior management on the need for a good data infrastructure to be able to do anything, data quality, data management, accountability, stuff like that, to get that pure foundation in place. But also in data literacy, AI literacy is educating the workforce. I think it's really important to reassure people that, we don't want to replace jobs. We want to make your life easier and bring tools that can add to your experience at work, and just make you more efficient, more enjoyable. So I think that's a really big thing. And I think also when it comes to literacy, it's so important for people to understand AI on the basic level at the moment, because I think AI is the future, and having just a baseline grasp of what it is and what it isn't is super important. And then, yeah, I'd say pillar number 2 is governance and stewardship of AI. So I think just having a basic alignment on things like AI risk appetite for the business is super important, because where is that line? Where are you comfortable? It needs to be talked about and agreed on, because otherwise everyone's going to have a very different idea of what the risk appetite for the business is. And that can lead to things like onboarding loads of tooling, shadow IT, you don't have full control of your data. Or it could be things like you might put a model into production that does something like promotion threshold optimization. Not that we have done that yet. But I think that's something that's you need to handle with care, because actually that could really impact your bottom line as a business. So, and then there's the governance legislation on top of that, especially with things like the EU AI Act and further legislation that's coming in. The
fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, I actually like it, because I think constricting freedoms can help drive innovation.
Yeah.
Because you have to do things, and you have to be more transparent across the business with things like the EU AI Act, which is great, because then people can see what's going on and can understand it in more detail.
That's very true. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday at the EU Edinburgh Chatbot Summit. Or by the time this goes out, it's probably a couple of weeks ago. And they were saying, the EU AI Act obviously it's incumbent on any organisation that wants to trade in Europe to be able to meet the AI Act sort of thing. But then Britain doesn't really have one. And it's almost like a little bit more wild west over there. And the point that this chap was making was that, in lieu of Britain having its own AI Act, for want of a better sort of phrase, it's a good idea for British companies or companies trading in Britain to just adopt it anyway, because as you were saying, it's all based on the rights of the end user, and therefore the point is, wouldn't it be better off being ahead of that and doing the right thing and kind of adopting those principles that are based on protecting people's rights and all that kind of stuff, rather than wait for 5 years for Britain to then announce their own and have to do a whole load of backtracking and rework and figuring it all out then,
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's easier just for the business as well to just abide by the kind of strictest regulation, because then you're covered. And there's a blanket policy across all geographies, rather than having to try and have individual setups in each domain. So
yeah, definitely. So we have literacy, we have governance, and we'll get into a bit more detail in these areas. But you said there was 5 pillars. So the other 3 are
the other 3 are your foundation machinery. So this is your MLOps setup, your data lakes. What do you actually need to develop models and host and serve them? And then the next one, I would say, all these are very important, but I'd say the 4th is probably most important, which is alignment with the business strategy. And this comes back to what we were talking about before around making sure you're solving business problems rather than just using tech for the sake of it. And I think driving use cases that are actually going to give you returns or improve customer experiences or make the business better, faster, safer is super important. And then the 5th one that I'd say it's kind of a new one, and that is the post-ChatGPT era, which is around democratizing generative AI in particular. So I think enabling people to get to grips with these kind of tools and creating the solutions for the business use cases that matter for them, that maybe a central AI team might not have the capacity to pick up, but actually it saves 2 hours of their day if they're able to get hands-on and create those solutions themselves. And I think we'll be able to learn a lot from that as well, of how like generative AI in particular can be applied across the business, and what works, what resonates with the workforce and what doesn't. And that probably also comes into the AI literacy piece as well, that you're enabling people to get hands-on, have a play, see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it seems as though, I say that the UK hasn't done anything legislation-wise. They haven't done anything legislation-wise, but what they have done last year was they put out kind of like an ambition to upskill the whole country, I suppose, in terms of like AI literacy. So, and they kind of bucket it from in a number of different sort of areas. So on the one hand, they've got like leaders, so like the people responsible for running the business. Then they've got practitioners, which are the people who are building the tools and applying the solutions. And then there's the end user, so like Joe Public, so to speak. And then there's the AI worker. And obviously they've put this kind of framework together, which is that different types of roles require different levels of literacy, and what you need to know about is different, that kind of stuff. But it's kind of like very clear that, if you look at what Microsoft's doing with Copilot, you look at what OpenAI is doing with ChatGPT team, and it's like Google with Gemini, all these tools are already being put into the hands of people day to day working within a business. And so it kind of like already for most organizations, there's already a need for that basic level of literacy, because if they're not using it at work, they're probably using their own version of ChatGPT at work or whatever it might be, so it's kind of like, big need for that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think also it's stuff like I think it's really interesting educating like Joe Public, as you say, because I think one of the like top cyber security threats of this year is around social engineering.
Right.
So I think having that education of actually not everything you see is real. This is AI. This is what it's capable of, and just bringing that lens of awareness is also quite important now with our current climate.
Yeah.
So,
the deep fakes and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of then the recipe, I suppose, if there is one for building maturity, out of those 5 pillars, it seems, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems as though the alignment with the business seems to be, I mean, do these come in a certain order? Or are they all happening at the same time? Because it seems as though like business alignment for me ought to be the place to begin. Like, what's the business goals? What's the direction we're traveling in? Where do we want to be in X years? What environment are we living in competitively, etc.? And therefore build everything from there. Would you concur with that? Is that usually where you would start, or is there a different approach to starting to build maturity within your organization?
Yeah, great question again. I'd say I think you're absolutely spot on that it should be driven from that business use case. And I would say that most companies, so Pandora, for example, AI is not new at Pandora. They've been on the AI journey since about 2018, 2019. So, and it very much started with the need. I think most of the work was within the marketing domain, working out how can like more traditional machine learning support with making sure the right customers are seeing the right things, and so that's where it stemmed from. I think, that ChatGPT has changed the landscape massively, and I think one of the things I always love to talk about with ChatGPT, which I love it because I just hadn't thought about it this much as a data scientist. But at the time that it was released, I don't even think it was the strongest LLM out there. Like, it didn't perform as well as everything else. But what was game changing was the UI and the user experience that they provided, making it free, making it, you just have to sign up and then you're free and can talk and get these amazing responses. And I think, can't really remember what the question was, but that was, I found that really fascinating. So now in our team, we've got UX designers, because we've really understood that actually to get adoption, it has to be an excellent customer experience or user experience. And I think that's one of the things that we maybe have struggled with in the past, that you can have a fantastic model, it's super smart, it's amazing, but if it's not exactly what the business need, or it's not quite filling the gap that's there, it's essentially worthless.
Yeah. Agreed. I'm glad to hear you say that you've got, designers in your team, because, that's the missing piece, I think, in many organizations at the moment. And I would say that's a good sign of maturity as well, which is like, I think that at the moment, a lot of this stuff is being approached from a technical perspective because, and completely understandably, you absolutely have to have technical skills to build any AI solution of any description for any organization. And also those that have technical skills are the ones that are able to get access to the tools to build more stuff. And it's really exciting for everyone around that. So the whole kind of industry and community is being really driven by the technical kind of community. I remember seeing a post the other week, and it said that success with AI is 5% AI and 100% engineering. And I remember reading that, and I thought, right, so 0% design. There's no consideration for the end user at all. Is that right? Because it seems to me at least, as though any solution that's got a user of any description, the needs of that user should be central to everything. And the validation of the ability to meet those needs should also be central to everything. And the way that you meet those needs is in the creation of the experience. And, to use the sort of like Steve Jobs' infamous phrase of start with the experience and work back to the technology, it feels as though that's kind of where we need to be, is like, this is what the experience needs to be like. This is an example of what we want it to be. And now let's figure out how we have the technology be in service of the experience so that the needs of the user are met. But not a great deal of organizations seem to have that kind of approach. A lot seem to have the approach of, this is a technical problem, leave it to the technicians and we'll sort it out. And again, there's absolutely not necessarily anything wrong with that as such, because you cannot make any of this happen without technical prowess, if you like. It's just that, for me at least, it seems as though design is missing from the equation. So yeah, happy to hear that you've actually got that over there, which is great.
Yeah, and I love that. I think that's such a good point, because it's reminded me of, I can't remember the name of the paper. I think it's a Google paper from must be 2018, 17. It's got this diagram with what's needed for like machine learning solutions, and the model is like a tiny square in the middle, and then it's got data pipelines, data quality, blah blah blah, and all those technical elements surrounding it to show, it's not, model's a tiny part, and the rest is the engineering that is essentially software with a tiny model in the middle, and then the data pipeline. But yeah, and I hope that since the launch of ChatGPT, that maybe that is changing. I think it definitely should, as you just said there, that at the end of the day, you're still creating a product, and you need that product to work for whoever is going to be using it. And it could be, in some cases, that it's literally just writing predictions to a database which is consumed somewhere else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that needs to be considered, and front and center of what you're building. So
yeah. I mean,
that's definitely what we're trying to
good.
do in the team.
Good. I mean, a great example of that is, you mentioned ChatGPT. Like, for ages, ChatGPT was pretty much text in, text out. Obviously, like Dolly, there's images that come out, and then it can create tables and do that kind of stuff. But it's still, the interface is still the same: text in, response out, text in, response out. It wasn't until relatively recently that if you ask it to create you a document of some description, it finally allowed you to then expand the document so that you can edit the document, and then you can have the conversation still on the side that then when you ask it to change something, it changes the document. So it's like, it's took years for them to realize that there's from a user experience perspective, it would be better to have the chat kind of disappear slightly to then bring forward the document or the thing that you're working on, give a bit of control back to the user, but still have the capability. So anyway, it's a weird situation that, like, it seems as though in some cases the design is coming second rather than first. But anyway, that's just my design complaints of the industry generally.
Great point, definitely.
Yeah. So how do you go about then? The foundation being having everything be aligned to the business kind of like strategy and all that kind of stuff. How does that sort of then trickle into the actual work that you do and how you decide to do what and what projects you take on and then what staffing you need and what tools you need, because it all kind of flows from that, doesn't it? So how do you go about, like, in a mature kind of AI enabled organization, what does use case and project selection look like?
Yeah, great, great question again. And I think I suspect this would probably vary by company. Um, but we start with the kind of the top level company vision. So if that's improving customer experience, improving, growth, whatever it may be, I think starting there. And then at Pandora, we're quite agile. So we've set OKRs and things like that for each of the different business areas. And I think when it comes to the AI team, we have how we're set up is we've got a center of excellence, which is trying to create like foundational models that can be used across the business. And then we've got federated teams as well that are much more closely aligned to different business areas and can work with them in much more detail on what are their business problems that they need to solve. And what we try it, and I think prioritization is always the hardest thing because there can always be amazing ideas and amazing opportunities, but how you've only got so many people in your team. So I think I definitely find prioritization the hardest because I want to do everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've got a number of kind of different phase gates to help with that process. Try and make sure that we're working on the right things and staying aligned with the overarching objective.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think that that's the other part of it as well, which is interesting, is like, especially when you reach a certain level of maturity where you've got like a federated model like that, where you've got teams like the hub and spoke kind of thing, where you've got teams working in their own thing. They can, the good thing about that is that they can react to their localized needs, which means that, and also then you can, you light many fires, and that's what creates the big kind of impact, is that you can enable the grassroots while you can manage the certain practices and processes and standards centrally and stuff like that, which is great. I suppose
Also,
go on.
just on that point,
Yeah.
what's also what we're trying to do is we've got like a centralized MLOps team as well. So what we want to do is be able to take away the kind of onus of the MLOps engineering and the reusable components away from the federated team, so that we've got one kind of best practice way of doing things. We can lift and shift different components across different teams, but we've got a standardized way of doing things, and that kind of frees up the teams to just focus on the use cases rather than having to build out more of the engineering components, because those are managed more centrally.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And you were talking earlier around governance and stuff, and obviously like there's various elements to governance, risk appetite you were talking about, and data and stuff like that, but also that model that you have also requires a degree of governance, because you don't kind of want this team over here doing whatever they want and going completely off piste, and and then this team over here is doing the exact same thing, solving the exact same problem, but they've built a totally different solution. And it's kind of like you kind of need to govern, although it's nice to have the flexibility to be able to respond locally in a departmental fashion to needs or whatever, you still want to have some degree of oversight, sharing, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on how an organization goes about establishing like governance from the sort of practitioner level.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think so what we do is we've got what we call the chapter, which is essentially all the data scientists, machine learning engineers, MLOps engineers. We get together every month to share what people are working on, share, news in the AI space, any new models that are exciting that we want to look into, and just learn from each other. And then under that governance umbrella, I think the transparency of what we were saying, having good documentation so that people can understand what it is you're working on, that's something that we're really trying to drive as well, and have a standardized way of doing things. So I think it's an ongoing challenge though, because as the needs of the business change and as teams grow, trying to make sure that everyone is on the same page and doing things in the same way is really important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose as AI kind of proliferates more and more, for me, I suppose I'm a bit idealistic in some cases because you have this vision and you know, like in other organizations that have similar sort of situations where like they've got localized teams in different geographies and one global center of excellence that sort of like learns what one geography does well and brings that back and disseminates that to everywhere else, and they try to like standardize on technologies and stuff like that. And you think like for a while that was like the idea of what maturity looks like. But actually, it's like the question is, what's after that? And if you think about what's after that, you were talking about democracy earlier on. Now, if you might go to, I don't know, any organization, and you might all standardize on something like email and calendars. So everyone might be on 365 using email and calendars, but maybe I take notes on a remarkable notepad and someone else
Yeah.
takes notes in, Word, and someone else uses another notepad. And it's like, and that's a very kind of like small, stupid, trivial example, but like the standardization of the technology for taking notes is less important than the standardization of the technology for the big stuff, like what email platform you use. So it's almost as if maybe on that sort of localized level, it might not be necessarily that much of an issue if certain things are being duplicated and this, that, and the other, as long as everyone's operating against the same ethos, which is we're solving problems, and we want to standardize the big stuff, and we're happy with a little bit of variation on the small stuff. I don't know if I'm making that up, but that seems as though that might be the sort of like next generation of that sort of federated model, because you can't manage everything, can you?
Yeah, and especially as everything is introducing AI features as well, it's like super hard to keep across everything of like where actually are we using AI across the business. But I think my steer on that is that it's important to select strategic tools. So these are the ones that you as a business have said, right, for this particular task, we are recommending this, we're supporting it, we're going to onboard people and educate people on how to use it, maybe create a community of champions and things that can help roll it out across the business. And then, but it's such a fast moving domain that there's new tools and things all the time. So I think it's really important to keep a culture of experimentation, to be able to try out new tools, compare them against other things, but to do it safely so that you know how those different providers are using your data, making sure that you're not using, secrets in public tools and things like that. So I think it's definitely a balance, but I think it's such a fast-moving domain that not experimenting and staying open-minded when it comes to new tooling would be a mistake.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the other element of governance, then, I think this is the bit that I think most people think about when they think about governance. They think about data governance, and things like that. Like, so how do you approach in a large organization with many different teams? How do you approach that side of things? Like what even is data governance in your kind of estimation?
So we have a separate data, like master data management team, who would definitely be the experts on this. I do what I'm told by them. But from my understanding, this is really about getting visibility of what are the key buckets of data across the organization. Is it consumer data? Is it network data, for example, like network of stores, supply chain? All this stuff can be broken down into, I think we've got a number of different buckets at Pandora. And then within each of those, you need an accountable person. So trying to put the onus on the business area that's generating the data to take responsibility for its quality, accessibility, and management generally. And I think having that data at source taken care of, maintained actively, and having that kind of proactive governance around it at source then means that if everyone uses the source data, then everyone's working off the same, like singing from the same song sheet.
Yeah.
So that's in theory. I think in practice, it's a huge challenge, especially for very big multinational corporations.
Yeah.
So,
And that goes back to literacy again, doesn't it? Because like those individuals and departments that are now responsible for the currency and cleanliness, for want of a better phrase, of their data, that's now something that maybe wasn't required of them before. Now it is required of them. And so like making it aware that how important this is, because for them on a day-to-day basis, it might not feel like it's that important. Might not feel like there's
yeah,
any kind of impact of spending a bit of extra time making sure that they're doing the right things and stuff like that. It's a bit like, the analogy I would use is in like the call center. You have agents answering phone calls all day, and what's really crucial, or historically what was really crucial, was having them document what that call was about. Because that
yeah,
information goes from the mouth of the customer into the head of the agent, and unless something's documented, it's gone forever.
yeah,
Obviously, it's different now. You've got lots of tools that will do topic modeling and all that kind of stuff these days. But like the challenge of contact centers of old was always making sure that these people were logging the right data so that the business
yeah,
could then understand the picture of what's actually going on with their customers. But for those agents, it doesn't make a bob's worth of difference whether they do it or don't do it. So it's kind of like it's how it's kind of like raising the importance of it and maintaining it when in an area where it might not directly affect the person that's being asked to do it now. It's interesting.
yeah, definitely. And I think it's a big challenge, especially with a company like Pandora, where there's such a vast array of people working through the business. So just for your listeners, Pandora is very exciting because they own the full end-to-end of the value chain. So right from designing the jewels and the jewelry through to manufacturing. So we own all our own manufacturing facilities, the supply chains, then the retail footprint, all the stores and everything. And then obviously there's the marketing, advertising, and customer care. So at each of those stages, there's loads of data that that is coming in and being generated. And then I think part of the purpose of an AI transformation is to give a great incentive to make sure that the data across the board is as high quality as possible, because you can't do AI without great data, as we were talking about before. So yeah, and I think having accountable people responsible for data quality and management, and then having the carrot of, actually, we could transform this process by being really predictive. We could be really intelligent on how we're, I don't know, optimizing this process. That can kind of drive the momentum or motivation to improve it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That I mean, so that means that not just having that operation for Pandora, that end-to-end kind of like approach, doesn't just mean that you have lots of data. It basically means that potentially you have all the data,
Yeah,
and most organizations, they don't have the full picture of their
yeah,
customer journey, basically. Yeah, I imagine that would probably give you opportunities that few other companies might have, essentially, because you can understand the manufacturing side, the distribution side, the retail side, the kind of like the full sort of end to end. So it must be that the opportunities must be endless over there.
yeah. And that's it. I think it's really powerful, and I think Pandora is just on a clear positive direct trajectory when it comes to AI, because there are so many opportunities across the business to leverage it and really have like strong, robust, data-driven decision making. But to that end, one of the use cases I can tell you about was it's called Customer Voices. And what we did was take a lot of customer feedback from our own website, but also across social media. So we looked at customer reviews on things that they bought, and we actually used the insights from those reviews to go back to the manufacturing process and improve how things were made. So it could be that that a lot of customers complained that a clasp kept breaking. So then we can take that straight back to the guys in our Thai manufacturing facilities to really improve and work on that specifically. So
Wow.
yeah, it is very powerful.
And that's one of the, everyone thinks about AI, they always think about automation. process automation predominantly. Well, I think that is one of the big benefits of being able to analyze data at scale, is that you can generate insights that can, if you act on them, can really improve all areas of the business. And the challenge is acting on them, basically. So, like, how does an organization, I suppose there's maybe a different degree to the whole maturity question that I hadn't quite appreciated before, perhaps, which is that it's all very well for data to exist in this business area, but most businesses exist in silos, and that data might be more useful to that business area. And so not only is it
Yeah.
giving that business area visibility over the data, but then empowering them or encouraging them or forcing them, whatever the methodology is, to act on it, to make improvements. And that's a really unique situation because, data gets lost among departments, and communication among different groups is quite challenging. So any sort of like things that you learned from that particular project that can be learned from others in terms of how to take data from one side of the business and get it to another side of the business so that they can make improvements without them feeling like, in manufacturing is a bit different, but like in many organizations, you might learn something in one side of the business that is something that's not quite going well in the other side of the business, and you need to have a conversation with someone to say, like, we need to improve it. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like the general communication across the organization of these different divisions that have their own incentives and their own kind of like agendas, how to go best about kind of like smoothing that communication to empower all of them to be able to leverage these insights effectively.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a massive one. And I think that's an like ongoing journey, because I think it comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is literacy, and it's probably data literacy potentially rather than AI literacy. But actually, these are the kind of insights that you can get from this data. Are you using it? Did you know that? And then the next level is, actually, did you know that this other area of the business is using your data? So any changes that you make will impact them and actually have a knock-on effect of all these different systems. And then I think the stage beyond that is democratizing access to the data where possible, so that people can explore and understand like the lay of the land in a bit more detail, and then that frees them up to collaborate between the different teams and start to break down those barriers and silos. So it's definitely not straightforward, but I think I think when you are at that level of maturity, it's incredible for the business, and spotting getting insights that you might not have a clue about, because maybe it's not directly in your domain, but it's something that is impacting you or what you worry about.
Yeah, there's a cultural element to that as well, isn't there? Which is that you want the culture to be such that every department has their interests aligned with the end goal. Now, the end goal most of the time is making happy customers, really, or making customers happy, rather, ultimately, because regardless of what your business goals are, monetary or otherwise, you really don't achieve any of those things without impacting the end customer or the users of the business, if you like. So I think there's a cultural thing there as well, which is that you could go through that data literacy process, but again, if the business incentives and cultures are not aligned to being open and collaborative and aligned to getting the best outcome, even if it means that I need to start changing something, it's a hearts and minds thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think again, it probably comes back to literacy, because it's creating that like data culture across the business as well. So and democratizing the data, having that sharing ability, and I guess getting the technical foundations in place to enable that.
Yeah. I mean, you alluded to that earlier on as well, in terms of one of those pillars being to get the sort of technical machinery sort of in place, and we've kind of alluded to bits and pieces around like what you might standardize on and kind of make a standard. This is the solution that we use for this, versus what you might allow some flexibility over. You've probably got a very sophisticated sort of system and suite of technologies over there. But for a business that is, you know, just looking to build their maturity and starting to build these capabilities, you know, we've spoken about being aligned to the business outcomes and, you know, prioritizing use cases and what's going to have the biggest impact for the business and for customers, etc. But all that's great. But then none of that is ever going to go anywhere unless you've got the technology to be able to sort of deliver against that. So
Yeah.
how do you approach getting some of that foundational stuff in place, like the buy versus build decision? You've got people and skill set decisions. You've got a lot of sort of stuff to do, and you might
Mm,
not know what's coming in future at the time, and you're kind of making decisions that are geared to solve the problem today, but also to be able to flex and advance over time. So how do you approach, like, you know, building technical maturity, if you like, and getting those foundational technologies in place? What are some of the considerations you've got?
yeah. I think buy versus build is it's always such an interesting question. And I think there's no right answer. It's very use case dependent, kind of almost time dependent as well, and just kind of what problem you're trying to solve. But I think my fear would be that it's important to have, if you want to do AI, you need that kind of MLOps setup in place. And I think what's important for getting kind of proper MLOps foundations ready is that you're more competitive in those buy versus build conversations as well.
Mm.
If you've got a mature AI team, data science team who can quickly do a POC, if you've got good data lake and data access foundations as well, which make it much easier to do proof of concepts, and then if they're successful, to push them out into production fast, I think that gives a massive edge over build versus buying, which always looks extremely shiny. You tend to have like very good salespeople promoting different tools, and maybe it is the right tool, but I think it's really important to be able to compare, especially on models that are business critical
Mm.
or have high impact. I think having full control over the model itself is really important. Whereas for something that's maybe a productivity assistant, it might not be worth building.
Yeah.
It might be just worth getting something in. We just need something quickly. Let's do this. This is a really good product. And actually, if we tried to build it, we might not be able to create something to the same standard.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I
Yeah.
do think having MLOps in place to be able to move from POC into production, but then also maintain models over the course of their life cycle is really important.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I literally had a conversation before this conversation with somebody who, very capable person, built a very capable team, has lots of experience of building this kind of software. And what you kind of said there has only just dropped and dawned on me that now is that having the capability to build it yourself. I think you said something, I can't remember the exact quote. You said having the capability to build it yourself puts you in a stronger position when it comes to buying. Was that the phrase you used? It was something like that.
To having that build versus buy conversation,
Yes, that's right.
because yeah, if you don't have your MLOps foundations in place, you can create a nice proof of concept, maybe in a Jupyter notebook, something like that. You could
Mm,
show that you can create a really good model, but actually then you have to tell the stakeholder, it's going to be like 6 months until we can get it into production at
mm,
the best.
yeah.
And they might not have 6 months. And this
Yes.
probably goes back to the user experience again, that it's, you know, I just need it now.
Yeah. Exactly. But and as well, like, you know, if you have that foundation, it allows you to sort of assess the right path. Like, so the conversation I was talking about earlier, it was somebody that was having a conversation with OpenAI, and they were saying, you know, we've got X thousand employees, and you want to charge us Y per month to use ChatGPT, but we could build the same thing using your
Yeah,
APIs for far
yeah,
cheaper. And so, you know, if unless you can drop your price, we're going to just do that. And so it's almost like it puts you, if you have the kit, and this is not every organization can do this because they don't have the skills necessarily, but like, I think having the capability to build in the first place and having some foundational technologies in place in the first place means that you can make those decisions a lot easier, because you can say, okay, well, we could build this. This solution exists. We can have
Yeah.
a strong commercial conversation with this organization, because we can build it ourselves if we want to. If we can't get the right price out of this, we're just going to build it ourselves. And so it's kind of like, it's an interesting thing I've
Gives
never
you
really appreciated.
options.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I guess establishing the team and building out those foundations is a big upfront investment.
Yeah.
But I think in the long term, it's absolutely worth it
100%.
because you just are much more free to make the right choice for the business problem that you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. And I know, I appreciate I didn't really realize the time. I had one question in terms of the teams and technologies. So, and then we can wrap it up. So the foundational technologies to get ML ops up and running, and the foundational team you need to do that, what might that look like? What are some of the foundational capabilities from a technology perspective, and some of the foundational skills that organizations need to invest in?
Yep. I'm just seeing if I can talk about we are using. I think I can.
You don't need to give names or anything like that. I just mean, like, capabilities, I suppose. Like, if I was to want to create something that, puts me in that position where I can decide to build or buy, obviously I need certain skills, and I need certain sort of foundational capabilities, whether it's data storage or, ability to build fine-tune models or whatever. I mean, you don't have to give us the specific details, but just like an indication of what some of those foundational sort of requirements might be.
Yeah, sure. So I guess on the technology side, I think it all starts with the data, right? So ideally, some kind of data lake or good database setups. And I guess now with Gen AI stuff, access to unstructured data as well, because I think traditionally things like documents are kept in folders, and there's not kind of centralized repository to keep this kind of data in. I think so we've got a machine learning platform, and it's a good one.
Yeah.
I won't say what it is just because I'm not sure about that.
You don't know. You don't have to.
So, and what that enables is that you can manage big data very easily. You can create proof of concepts with tools like Python, traditional machine learning. You can register the models that you created, train models. It's built on the cloud, so you've got the ability to choose what kind of compute size you need for the tasks you've got at hand, and then the ability to host and serve the models that you build via APIs and things, or write the outcomes to databases. And then on the Gen AI side, I think the basic tools again are kind of cloud machine learning platforms. How we've got things set up, and the various teams that are involved, I think this is a big question. If you're just starting out, I'd say probably start with a data engineer, because you can start with, if you can tap into the data and start getting insights and getting your data into good shape, that's an awesome starting point. I think previously, I'm not sure if it's still the case, people used to just hire data scientists. But then their time would be spent doing data engineering, trying to get access to the data, get it into the right state to be able to do modeling. And it's kind of a waste of their skill set.
Right.
So our core foundation team, we've got data engineers, data scientists, so they build the models themselves, machine learning engineers who are really experts in taking those nice core models into production. Then we've also got a separate data and machine learning platform team, which have an MLOps team as well, and they're really creating enabling like machine learning at scale. So creating things like terraformed infrastructure so that you can spin up and spin down when you want, that you're making the most efficient use of resources that are needed for the solutions that you've got. Yeah.
Nice.
I think. Oh, and then I forgot to mention, we talked about the UX,
Yeah.
UX designers, and then to make sure that everything is staying aligned to the business OKRs and the business strategy, it's super important to have like product managers or product owners to bridge the technical and non-technical conversations as well.
Nice. That was a really great picture. That's really great. What advice would you've mentioned one bit of advice there for people getting started and companies that want to start building this capability, which is to first of all consider a data engineer. What would be some of the other kind of bits of advice that you would have for organizations trying to build their AI maturity?
I think having that holistic view, trying to have that higher level view across the organization of where things can be improved and where AI fits, rather than being too focused in the details. I think that's it's a very delicate balance, I'd say, because you need to start, like we were talking about earlier, with solving specific business problems and building out from there. But at the same time, you need to push that the data and AI culture across the business, pushing the literacy, highlighting the need for governance and risk management and getting all those things in place. So I think it's a combination of the two.
Nice.
I don't know if that's a helpful answer.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Yeah, I think you need to have that sort of like wider picture, don't you? I think like you need to have both kind of like, yeah, I call it like purposeful and emerging, which is like the purposeful strategy is the business from the top saying this is what we need to focus on, this is what we need to do, these are the outcomes that we need, and we're going to support you, we're going to fund you, we're going to etc. But then like the emergent is we're going to try this, we're going to try that, this is a problem we're going to try and solve, let's try and solve that. But you kind of need some of the like you know, it's this, again, that's what leads to that hub and spoke thing, isn't it? It's like the centralized team solving the big problems. Here's our big use cases that we want to tackle, and then here's the kind of like smaller ones that we can enable people to kind of like, you know, experiment with to solve themselves, sort of thing. So you kind of need to have that wide holistic view, don't you, of the organization to be able to find a place to start in either case, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also it's hard to say this is the way that everyone should do it. I think it's very much depends on where the business is when it comes to data and AI maturity, what do they need out of it, and kind of a case by case basis. I think it might vary.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Wicked. Well, Sonia, this has been absolutely fantastic. I think, I mean, I could stay here all day and continue this conversation. We probably didn't even get to half of what we were supposed to.
Oh, really?
Well, we
probably witter on too long.
No. I think we did, but I think we there's always lots left on the table because the topic's so sort of interesting and deep, you know. Like, so yeah, definitely we can. I'd love to do this again at some point in future. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate it.
Ah, thank you. No, it's been lovely.
Nice
Good to see you again as well.
Likewise. Yeah, perfect. Nice one. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much. Bye now.